stranger in the night. People used to laugh at me. Some thought I was stupid, but looking back, I don't think I was. I did have difficulty understanding them. If they talked very fast, the noises got jumbled up and my head hurt to try and keep up with their words. Worse still, if they waved their arms or changed their face, I had to look away to filter their meaning. They were pushing too much information at me, and it became a blur, a bewildering storm through eye and ear that clouded my mind. Their eyes were the worst. Their eyes often did not match their words or their faces. If I dared to look into their eyes, I could make out their thoughts, and they confused me more because they did not mirror their words or their actions. I stopped looking into their eyes or even at them. If I looked away, I could just about understand their words, and that too only if they spoke softly and slowly. My parents did that for me, and my brother, my family, and those who liked me. I seem to have many of those because many in my village looked out for me. They said I was the happiest baby they had ever known. My mother said that people would smile just looking at me because I was always smiling at them. She loved me so much that she could not sing enough for me. My father did not sing, but he was a joker. He would play with my brother and me, and we would laugh so much that my brother would plead with him to stop. Why are fathers experts at tickling? I don't know, but even the sight of him making claws out of his hands would reduce us into quivering bundles, shrieking with laughter but paralyzed, unable to escape. My brother was my hero. I did not know it then, but he was always getting into trouble except when he was with me. He would play with me and try to carry me. Whatever happened, he always looked out for me. And then something changed in my world. I started to understand words, and they became too much for me. The sounds confused me, the sights even more, and I had to look away. My head hurt, and I would bump it against any hard surface to ease the ache and sort the noises. It was as if the rhythm of the bumps pushed out the clamor and made my world right again. If that was not enough, and the noises were very loud, I learned to hum loud enough to drown the assault. I stopped speaking the few words that I had gained. That, and my head bumping and my tuneless humming helped because fewer people tried to speak to me. Even then, I could look into my father's eyes and my mother's and my brother's, but very few others. People were frightening, loud noises were frightening, but animals, including the loud ones, they were fascinating. My mother used to say that goats would stop grazing to look at me, and even the meanest donkey would allow me to touch it. My father got me a dog. Thinking back, that must have seemed strange to the rest of the village because dogs were not considered clean. My dog helped me get some of my language back. I could talk to him. My words were nothing more than noises to other people, but my dog would understand. He would look into my eyes, and if I peered back, like me, he would look away. He knew the exact moment to look away, just as my brain started to whir uncomfortably. With time, that span lengthened, and I was able to look up once in a while. My sounds were distilled into a few key words, and it was my dog who helped get me there. He helped in many other ways too. He would go with me everywhere. His presence gave me the courage to look at hills and clouds, the night sky with its bewildering spray of stars. Even other people, as long as they did not look at me. I think he was the only reason my parents accepted the advice of the village elders and allowed me out of the village to earn my keep. My father grilled the man who was to become my teacher, as he had the others who had come before him. I think he chose wisely because my tutor was never unkind to me. He pushed me hard and I took time to learn. I think my dog learned faster than I did. Our teacher spent as much time teaching me about working my dog as he did about all other things put together. I enjoyed my lessons because my master did not speak much, and the sheep obeyed him. I enjoyed my work because we roamed the high hills and searched out secret meadows, far away from villages and towns with their bewildering people and their babble of noises. We would sometimes come across others like us, wandering the solitary places with their herds. These wanderers seemed to know each other well, enough to camp together and exchange stories and food before moving on the next day in different directions. However much they enjoyed each other's company, I suspect they enjoyed the silences more. My strangeness was one amongst many in them, and very few questioned my lack of conversation. Those that did had to contend with my dog. He seemed more expert than me at reading their tone and their thoughts. His growls irked some of them, but he was a big dog, and it was not worth their while to suffer any injury. Like us, they needed their health for their livelihood. Over the years, I was accepted into the loose brotherhood, and some even asked for my help. The wanderers knew that I disliked crowds. If we were camped close to a town and they needed to go into it, I was the one chosen to look after the camp. I didn't mind. The night sky and the animals were my friends, so much less frightening than the eyes and mouths of strangers. It was one such night when the unexpected happened. There was a loud noise, so loud that it hurt my head. I shut it out with my hands over my ears, and for good measure shut my eyes too. My companions must have been drinking. The noise that beat against my hands buffeted my ears, and the increasingly bright light of their fire filtered through my shut eyelids. Time seemed to stretch, but the assault did not stop. I was forced to bang my head against the ground and hum as loud as I could to stifle the noise and the light that hammered my brain. I did not dare uncover my ears or open my eyes. I just about managed to hold on to my reason. Time crawled past my silently screaming mind, and then the noise vanished. The light disappeared. I was able to breathe. But I did not open my eyes or uncover my ears just in case my drunken companions decide to start their uproar again. It was their shaking that broke open my barriers. I struggled, but they pried my hands off my ears and shouted at me. My teacher shut them up and spoke slowly and softly into my ears. They wanted to go into the town that nestled below the hills where we had camped. They all wanted to go, and I was happy to get rid of them. The wine must have been strong, for the quiet ones were speaking the loudest, and the babble of their many voices robbed the air of any meaning that I could glean. My peace was restored when their noise faded with the distance. The starry sky soothed away the memory of my painful awakening. I was glad to be alone, and I walked around our camp making sure none of the animals were disturbed or wandering. The quiet was good medicine. I hoped my companions would not hurry back. They took longer than I expected. I could hear the hubbub of their voices long before they appeared, and I wished they had not continued their drinking. They did not seem to want to sleep and did not mind when I moved away. I think they sensed my alarm and left me alone. The distance helped me tone down their voices and the excitement that made slow men speak fast. My brain that was starting to race again slowed down once more. The night sky began to spin its welcome spell over me when I noticed the stranger in their midst. He was sitting with them and seemed part of their conversation, yet they did not seem to notice him. He knew I had seen him, but he did not appear to mind. He smiled at me and I quickly looked away. Something about him disturbed me and my sleep disappeared. I would glance at him from time to time, but he did not look back. I noticed that my companions gradually fell silent as they drifted off in their blankets. Finally, it seemed the stranger staring into the embers and I were the only ones left awake. He spoke softly then, and I do not know how his words reached my ears. I looked up, but he continued to stare into the embers. It was easier to concentrate on his words if I had to look at only his profile. He asked me whether I had gone into town like my companions, but seemed to know the answer before I replied. His hearing was at least as good as my own. I did not need to speak loudly. He explained that I needed to go into the town to where my friends had gone. He gave me directions. The gentleness of his voice stilled my fears, and he explained that he would stand guard over the camp. I don't know why I believed him. Maybe because my dog did not growl. He is a fine judge of character, and he had not bothered to lift even an eyebrow at the stranger. That stood for something, and I let myself be persuaded. I got up and wrapped my coat around me. The still night was cold. I glanced at the stranger as I set out, and he nodded back. The first and the last time that our eyes met. I hurried away with my dog. I do not like towns, and I did not quite like having to go into this one alone. I hurried. Hurry meant I had to think less, and thinking less meant I worried less. Fortunately, there was enough light. I could not see the moon, but it must have been out as the light on the ground was quite bright. I hesitated at the edge of the town. I preferred the wide open spaces as the narrow streets always stifled me. I took a minute to draw in a few deep breaths and remember the stranger's instructions. Then I plunged into the maze, relieved in part that the streets were silent and empty. Every time that the twists and turns of the warren began to close in on me, I would stop, take another few deep breaths, and remember the stranger's words. The moonlight made the unfamiliar surroundings less threatening, and I carried on. That and my dog. I was glad that he had come with me, his furry presence a balm to the prickling of my skin. I finally reached the dimly lit hovel. The people inside must have woken up when I tripped over a wooden bucket. The man who came out was not amused. I think he realized that I was at least as scared as he was. The woman's soft call settled the matter, and he stepped aside to allow me in. I'm big for my age. I had to duck to enter. Once inside, I could barely make out the details in the light of the oil lamp. The man followed me in and pointed at the shadows. They sharpened in the lamplight into the form of the woman who had called. She was young, almost as young as me, and she seemed very tired. She beckoned me close and I peered, but I could see nothing other than the pale blur that was her face. I don't know if she was irritated by my slowness, as many others are. She suddenly held up a bundle, and without thinking, I knelt to reach her outstretched arms. The man must have been alarmed by my clumsiness. He stepped forward, but the bundle was in my hands. It moved, and everything stopped. I looked into a tiny wrinkled face, and a tiny mouth opened into a tiny yawn. I was startled. I almost dropped him, but in the dark, I don't think his parents realized. I'm used to newborn lamps, but here I was holding a human that was dwarfed by my hands. It was as if my brain's two halves were pushed apart to work separately. One half observed me and my stupefaction. The other focused on every wrinkle of that ancient, new face. I almost dropped him a second time when he opened his eyes. My face was so close to his that I could not duck away. We stared at each other, eyeball to eyeball, and it was like looking into the universe. I don't know what happened or how or why. In that moment of time, I seemed to see the beginning and the end. Glory and sorrow and then glory again. The enormity of what I witnessed staggered me. The astounding contradiction of what I held in my arms against the backdrop of my surroundings kept me on my knees. How could I, a shepherd, carry, even touch such a gift? The baby blinked. Time resumed. The separate halves of my brain seemed to merge back again. They even fitted better. I was whole once more. What gift had I for the newborn? I had nothing of value but that which I valued most. My friend, my dog. I hesitated, but I could not shake the thought that my best was the very least I could give. I called to him and he came willingly. The baby gurgled and held on to the warm fur. He must have tugged the hairs, but my friend did not growl. Instead, he nuzzled the baby and the baby snuffled back. It may have been a reflex action, but the little wrinkled hand patted the broad head twice. In that moment, something seemed to pass between the two. My friend wagged his tail and then turned and trotted out. The baby was hungry and looked for its mother. I handed back the bundle and stepped out as he began to feed. I staggered away. My brain could not keep up with what I had seen and sensed, and the thoughts that careened through the inside of my head. I should have thanked the parents, but I did not look back because I could see nothing else. I don't know how I got back to the camp. Suddenly, I had arrived, and dawn was breaking. My dog was waiting for me. A gift accepted and returned with kindness. I looked for the stranger, but he was nowhere to be seen. that night changed my life. I did not realize it then, but the connections in my brain were reset. Looking people in the eye remains a struggle, but words and sounds are no longer a maelstrom. I can pick through the many signals and distill some meaning. Yet, I still have to work harder than most other people when the threads are no longer hopelessly tangled. I could start to heal, start to properly learn. Amazing grace. The end.